Welcome to Life Stories. Today's tale is one of betrayal, redemption, and unexpected love. Ava thought she had everything, until the man she loved, and her closest friend, shattered her world in one evening. Heartbroken and humiliated, she made an impulsive decision that changed her life forever. Little did she know, this reckless move would lead her to a billionaire who saw her for who she truly was, offering a proposition that would not only heal her wounds but also open doors she never imagined. Stay tuned as we dive into a story of second chances, self-worth, and the power of unexpected connections. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey. There was something about the way the city lights shimmered that night, reflecting off the wet pavement like scattered diamonds. A perfect evening, filled with promises unspoken and expectations set too high. I should have known. I should have seen the signs long before they spelled themselves out in front of me. But love makes fools of us all, doesn't it? I had spent the entire afternoon getting ready, my fingers trembling with a mix of excitement and unease. It had been weeks since Jake and I had a proper evening together. Lately, he had been distant, his mind occupied with work, at least. That's what he had told me. Late meetings, urgent deadlines, vague excuses that didn't quite add up but were easy to overlook when you wanted to believe in someone. Tonight was supposed to change that. The moment I slipped into my midnight blue dress, I felt like myself again, like the woman he once adored. The one who could make him laugh with nothing more than a glance. I ran my hands through my dark curls one last time, ensuring everything was flawless, not because I needed to impress him, but because I needed this night to be perfect. The cab ride to the Lexington was filled with soft jazz playing through the radio, a soothing hum against the noise in my head. I stared out at the city. New York had a way of making even the most ordinary nights feel cinematic. The skyline stretched high, towering over the streets like silent witnesses to a million untold stories. And mine was about to unfold in ways I could have never predicted. When I arrived, the warm glow of the restaurant's chandeliers spilled out onto the sidewalk. Inviting, elegant, I took a steadying breath, letting the hope settle in my chest before stepping inside. The hostess smiled, a polite, practiced expression as she led me toward our reserved table. And that's when everything stopped. There, seated in the dim golden light, was Jake, his familiar posture, the way he lazily traced the rim of his wineglass with his fingertips. It was all so intimately familiar. But what wasn't familiar was the woman sitting across from him. Lauren. Her laugh rang through the space, soft and melodious, as if she belonged there, as if this moment had been crafted for just the two of them. Her perfectly manicured fingers reached across the table, brushing over Jake's hand in a way that sent a sharp, piercing ache straight through me. For a second, I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe it was a coincidence. A friendly dinner between colleagues, friends, even. But then I saw it, the way Jake looked at her. The quiet, amused smirk playing at his lips. The way their bodies leaned just a little too close, as if sharing a world I was no longer a part of. A betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's in the smallest details, the way someone shifts away from you in bed at night. The way their laughter becomes rarer. The way their texts become shorter, clipped, empty. And in that moment, watching them together, I realized that Jake had left me long before I ever arrived at this restaurant. The sound of my heels clicking against the polished floor was drowned out by the ringing in my ears. My breath caught, my throat tightening, but I forced myself to step closer. I wasn't sure if it was courage or sheer devastation that propelled me forward. But I wasn't going to look away. Lauren turned first. Her expression was the definition of rehearsed innocence, though her eyes gleamed with something else, satisfaction. "Oh, Ava," she said, feigning surprise, though I saw the way her lips twitched with amusement. "I didn't expect to see you here." Liar. Jake's gaze finally landed on me, and for a fleeting moment, something flashed across his face. Surprise? Guilt? But it vanished just as quickly, replaced with irritation. "You look surprised," he said, leaning back in his chair, his voice smooth, almost mocking. His fingers swirled the wine in his glass as if my presence were nothing more than an inconvenience. A slow, Sickening realization crept over me. He wasn't even sorry. I swallowed past the lump in my throat, my nails digging into my palms as I tried to steady my breathing. How long? Jake exchanged a glance with Lauren before exhaling, his smirk returning as if this entire moment was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. Does it matter? His tone was indifferent, dismissive, cruel. I had imagined 1,000 different ways our love story could end, perhaps in tears. Perhaps in a quiet goodbye over coffee. Or maybe, just maybe, in a way that left us both wishing we could go back. But never like this. Lauren sighed dramatically, sipping from her glass as if she were discussing the weather. Come on, Ava, she murmured, setting her drink down with a soft click. Did you really think you were enough for him? The words sliced through me like glass. I forced myself to breathe, to hold myself together even as the walls of the restaurant seemed to close in. I had spent years with Jake, believing we were building something real, something worth fighting for, and yet, here he was, treating me like an afterthought. The weight of wasted time, of love misplaced, settled heavy in my chest. And then, before I could stop myself, I whispered, I hope you choke on your lies. Jake arched an eyebrow, clearly amused, but I didn't stay long enough to hear whatever condescending remark he had lined up next. I turned on my heel and walked away, my heart pounding so violently that I feared it might burst. The night air was sharp and cold against my skin as I stepped outside. But it did nothing to numb the fire burning inside me. 3 years. 3 years of love, devotion, and dreams that had meant nothing to him. As I strode down the sidewalk, the echoes of their laughter followed me. A cruel reminder that to them, this was just another forgettable night. But for me, it was the moment everything changed. The night air was sharp against my skin, but it did nothing to cool the fire burning inside me. Each step I took away from the Lexington felt like a battle against the fury and humiliation clawing at my chest. My heart pounded, my breath came in shallow gasps. But no matter how far I walked, I couldn't escape the sound of their laughter. The image of them leaning in close, whispering, touching as if I had never existed. I wanted to scream, I wanted to cry, I wanted to disappear. Instead, I did something reckless. My steps faltered when I saw them emerging from the restaurant, still wrapped in their bubble of smug satisfaction. Jake, with his lazy arrogance. Lauren, with her perfectly rehearsed smirk, neither of them sparing me a second thought. My body tensed, my fists clenched, but before I could let the grief swallow me whole, my eyes landed on him. A stranger, tall, broad-shouldered, exuding effortless confidence. He stood near the curb, his hands tucked into the pockets of his tailored suit, watching the world with a detached curiosity. His presence felt powerful, commanding, like he was the kind of man who never waited for anything. People came to him. And before I knew what I was doing, I did something insane. I marched straight toward him, grasped the lapels of his suit, and pulled him down into a kiss. Gasps rippled through the air, but I didn't care. I kissed him like my life depended on it. Like I was trying to erase every ounce of pain Jake had left behind. At first, he stiffened. Who wouldn't? But then, something changed. Instead of pushing me away, his arms slid around my waist, steadying me, anchoring me. His lips moved against mine. Slow, deliberate, controlled. Unlike me, he wasn't desperate. He wasn't frantic. He was intentional. And just like that, the world blurred. The sound of the city, the whispers, the weight of betrayal, it all melted away. The only thing that existed was the warmth of his hands, the quiet dominance in his touch, and the way he kissed me back as if he had all the time in the world. Then reality came crashing in. I pulled away abruptly, my breath ragged, my heart slamming against my ribs. What had I done? I stumbled back, my hands still curled in the fabric of his suit. My head spun as I tried to gather my thoughts, to form an apology, but before I could speak, a voice sliced through the air. Ava? Jake. I turned, my body stiffening at the sight of him standing just a few feet away. His expression unreadable, but there, just beneath the carefully constructed mask, was something unexpected. Jealousy. He hadn't expected this. He had assumed I'd crumble. that I'd run off crying like a woman scorned. But instead, I was here, kissing a man who looked like he owned the world. I lifted my chin, feigning indifference. Yes, Jake? His jaw tightened. His gaze flickered toward the stranger beside me. Assessing, calculating. And that's when the man I had just kissed chuckled, slipping his hands into his pockets. Good question, he mused, tilting his head as his gaze met mine. I'd love to hear the answer myself. My stomach dropped. I had no idea who he was. Silence stretched between us, thick with tension, as the stranger's dark eyes studied me with quiet amusement. His gaze wasn't accusing or irritated, just intrigued. As if I were an interesting puzzle he had yet to figure out. Meanwhile, Jake shifted beside Lauren, his fingers curling into tight fists. I had wanted a reaction. I had wanted him to feel even a fraction of what I had felt when I saw him with her. And now, seeing that flicker of jealousy in his expression, I knew I had succeeded. But now, I had a bigger problem. Who the hell had I just kissed? I swallowed hard, forcing my composure. I don't think I owe anyone an explanation. The stranger smirked, his sharp features unreadable. Interesting answer. Lauren let out a sharp laugh, stepping forward as she looped her arm through Jake's. Really, Ava? This is pathetic, she sneered. Dragging some poor guy into your drama just to make yourself feel better? Before I could fire back, the stranger turned his attention to her. I'd appreciate it if you didn't talk about my woman like that. Time seemed to freeze. Jake's expression darkened, his body tensing beside Lauren, who visibly faltered. My pulse thundered in my ears as I whipped my head toward the man beside me. What? The stranger exhaled, adjusting the cuffs of his suit as if this entire situation was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. Then, with a smooth confidence that sent a shiver down my spine, he placed a hand on the small of my back. If you'll excuse us, Ava and I have somewhere to be. He guided me away before I could even process what was happening. His touch light but firm. I had no choice but to follow, my heels clicking against the pavement as my mind scrambled to catch up. It wasn't until we rounded the corner, stepping into the quieter part of the street, that I yanked myself free. Okay, I breathed, spinning to face him. Who the hell are you? The stranger chuckled, slipping his hands into his pockets. Grant Calloway. The name sent a jolt of recognition through me, like a distant memory surfacing from the depths of my mind. I knew that name. Everyone did. Grant Calloway, the CEO of Calloway Industries. One of the youngest and most elusive billionaires in the country. A man who was impossible to meet unless he wanted to be found. My stomach twisted. Oh, my God. Grant watched my realization unfold, a small smirk playing on his lips. Surprised? That makes two of us, I muttered, running a shaky hand through my hair. I wasn't exactly expecting to be dragged into a lover's quarrel tonight. I exhaled sharply, pressing my fingers against my temples. Look, I didn't know who you were. That kiss it was a mistake. Grant tilted his head, his smirk deepening. Maybe, he murmured, or maybe it was fate. I blinked. Excuse me? His eyes gleamed with something unreadable. We'll see. I stared at Grant, trying to decipher what exactly he meant. But he gave nothing away. His dark eyes held the same quiet amusement, as if this was just another business negotiation to him. Meanwhile, my heart was still racing from the absurdity of what had just happened. I had kissed a billionaire, in public, without knowing who he was. And now, he was looking at me like I was an interesting challenge he had yet to solve. I let out a shaky breath. Look, whatever this was, it's over now. I appreciate the save, but I don't need anything else from you. Grant chuckled, slipping his hands into his pockets. That's the thing, Ava, you might not need me, but I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. I narrowed my eyes. Why do I feel like that's never a good thing? He ignored my sarcasm and gestured toward the sleek black car parked at the curb. A driver stood by, waiting. Let's take a drive. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to walk away. But curiosity won, the moment I slid into the passenger seat of his luxury car. The scent of leather and expensive cologne filled my senses. Grant settled in beside me, completely at ease, The driver pulled into traffic. The city lights blurring past us as Grant finally spoke. You want to make Jake jealous. His voice was smooth, matter of fact. I stiffened. That's not. Don't lie. He cut in, smirking. You wanted him to see you with someone else tonight. You wanted to hurt him. I swallowed hard, looking away. He wasn't wrong, but hearing it said aloud made it feel petty. Grant continued. You're in luck because I have a proposal for you. A mutually beneficial arrangement. I turned back to him. Wary. What kind of arrangement? His smirk deepened. You pretend to be my girlfriend for the next few weeks. Publicly, of course. In return, I'll help you. I frowned. Help me how? Grant leaned back, tapping his fingers against his knee. Your company, Hartman Media, has been trying to land a contract with Callaway Industries for months. Haven't they? My stomach twisted. How do you? I do my research. He said smoothly. Let's just say that if you agree to this, I'll make sure your career benefits from it. I let out a sharp laugh. So, let me get this straight. You want me to be your fake girlfriend, and in return, you'll do me a business favor? He shrugged. Call it what you want. I think it's a fair trade. I exhaled, my mind spinning. This was insane. Absolutely insane. But the thought of Jake and Lauren, the way they had laughed at me, the way they had dismissed me like I was nothing. I turned back to Grant, my heart pounding. Fine, I said, but we do this my way. His smirk widened. I wouldn't expect anything less. The city stretched endlessly before us, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of Grant's penthouse, I watched as life continued beyond the glass, cars weaving through the streets. People moving from one place to another, oblivious to the fact that my entire world had changed. I had spent so long believing that love had to be earned, that I had to fight to be chosen. But Grant had never asked me to prove my worth. He had simply seen me, just as I was, and decided I was enough. He stepped beside me, his presence grounding. Lost in thought again? I turned to him, a soft smile playing on my lips. Just, taking it all in. His gaze held something deeper tonight, something unspoken, yet undeniable. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught. I know you're not the type who needs grand gestures, he said, his voice steady, but I also know I don't want a life that doesn't have you in it. He flipped open the box, revealing a stunning yet simple ring, elegant, timeless, just like him. This isn't just a proposal, Ava, this is a choice. You and me, forever, on our terms. Tears pricked my eyes as I looked at him. At the man who had walked into my life when I least expected it and changed everything. I slipped the ring onto my finger, my heart pounding. Yes. Grant smiled, a rare, genuine smile, before pulling me into his arms. And as his lips met mine, I knew with absolute certainty, this wasn't just the end of our story. It was only the beginning. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more amazing videos.